Mobile phone technology spreads across Africa. Demand has soared for secure, independently powered phone towers. Our next guest says he wants his company to own 20,000 sites within 5 years. Sam Darwish is the CEO at IHS and joins us around the set now. Sam, we've been following a lot of the news flow, and it's pretty obvious out there that in many of the developed markets, the big mobile phone networks are trying to sell their towers, the likes of KPN, T-Mobile, for instance. But you own most of these mobile phone towers in Africa, so tell us a little bit about the business.
Well, it's something Africa has been lagging behind, definitely. It's something that we saw pick up 2 years ago. Most operators traditionally built and owned their own towers. 2 years ago, they became under pressure. They had to grow the networks massively while keeping costs under control. And the only way to do that effectively is really to share your towers. And that's when they started selling their towers and they started growing using people like us. With roughly 35% market share and 6 countries of operations, we're definitely the leader in Africa today.
What are the infrastructure needs in this business for Africa? Because we know that the trends in the developed markets are that many people are using smartphones and tablets. There's increased connectivity. Are the towers in Africa adequate as Africa also moves towards this trend of smartphones and connectivity?
Not really, I won't say so. Africa today has roughly 1 billion inhabitants, of which 600 million are connected via voice. So there is massive room for growth. It's been growing at around 8, 9 to 10% a year. We expect that to continue for the next 10 years. What compounds the growth, the explosive growth, is the fact that data is almost inexistent. It's sub 10%. We expect that to grow by at least 10 times in the next 5 to 10 years. Also, the population in Africa is young. It's expected to double by 2050, so that puts another dimension to the expected growth.
What about, it's interesting, the challenge for this company, I would imagine, is on the capex side, because presumably it's a very capex intensive business. I mean, the macro story I think is interesting, and we'd love to come back to that, but what about the capex versus cash generation in the business?
Well, it's definitely capital intensive. A tower costs around $200,000, and it's mostly because in Africa, as opposed to the US, for example, or Europe, you need to build a small power system. Actually, not a small power system. You have to have diesel generator, you have to have batteries, you have to have solar systems. We're a champion of solar system. That costs a lot of money. So if you count the number of towers on the continent today, you're talking about 170,000. So roughly $40 billion has went into that. We need another 30 to 50,000 towers. That's another 10 to 15 billion dollars. So it's highly capital intensive, and that's why. You need large balance sheet investors to be part of it. Part of our shareholders is the World Bank, represented by the IFC. Vandel, also one of the largest investors in Europe, have recently taken a stake in the company.
Do you have a sense of sort of the return on investment on these towers? Do you have a sort of IRR target, or?
Well, it's easy to achieve IRRs of 25 and 30% if you get your tenancy right. It means you have to have full sharing. The system is not about one operator occupying a tower. It's about convincing 2 or 3 to occupy that same tower, effectively dividing the cost among themselves. That's how you make your return, and that's how you can pass the cost to them.
Well, as Chris makes the very adequate point about capital requirements for your business, is it the best place for your business to be listed on the Nigerian Stock Exchange? It would seem like there are other more liquid markets with access to capital.
Yes, for sure. Well, we listed 3 years ago. We had certain requirements then. These requirements have changed, so we may contemplate different plans in the future. But I do agree with you.
What would be a more suitable market for you then? Would the UK be a market you would chase after, or closing the gap with regulation is just too great at this stage for your company?
Well, for the medium term, we don't have plans to list or relist somewhere else, because we have enough private equity. We think that can take us to the next level. But if we are to consider listing, London Stock Exchange could be one of the places.
Can we just briefly go back to the macro story? Because people get very excited about Africa, and they mention the 1 billion consumers. Of course, the thing we mustn't forget is it's more than 50 countries, makes up 1 billion people. But what I find intriguing is people say economic growth is being transformed by the use of mobile phones in these African countries. Can you talk to us about that? Give us some color on that.
Well, I moved to Africa in '98, so I've seen how the transformation has occurred. Then you didn't have even a middle class, right? I mean, telephones were so expensive. Nigeria, for example, had 300,000 telephone lines in 2001. Today they have 90 million mobile phones. I mean, you can see. So it changed the way people transact business. It changed the way people communicate, the way people romance even. I mean, it changes the whole thing. And I think we're also at a tipping point, because the spread of smartphones, the smartphones have not really spread the way they're supposed to spread, because they're still a bit expensive. So while we see Africans using voice to communicate, and that has definitely transformed their lives, I think the next big thing is allowing them to basically use smartphones and take it to the next level.
It seems incredible in this day and age that the technology you're talking about and the developments you're talking about are all going to be determined by your access to diesel at the moment, aren't you? Let's be honest about it. If you don't get your diesel supply there, or there are disruptions to the supply of diesel to the generators which power those towers, you've got a major problem, haven't you? That seems quite an archaic problem to have for such a high-tech industry.
Yes, it is. It is actually, because grid is not reliable in most African countries, and that's why we're championing the drive to reduce diesel consumption. We, as a company, on the sites we own, we have reduced our diesel consumption by 30% in less than a year. On top of that, we're installing solar systems on many of our sites to further drive the consumption down.
Solar systems work?
It works, and the good thing...
I imagine the weather would be quite inhospitable in many...
It doesn't work everywhere, everyhow.
Yeah.
It has to be designed. It cannot be one shoe fit all kind of thing. It has to be designed as per site, per area, per consumption. So it's a bit sophisticated, sure, but it works on at least 10 to 20% of the sites.
Okay, lovely. Look, I think we've had a very incisive look at all these issues, and we look forward to seeing how your company develops. And thank you very much indeed for the time. It's Sam Darwish, CEO of IHS.